Yes.
And doomed to fail, shocking video emerges of French police partying rather than stopping migrants. Only that, will we ever see an end to the small boats crisis? And that story about the surgeons is so shocking. These women surgeons are being sexually assaulted in the operating theatre, sometimes during surgery.
Yeah.
How appalling is that?
Yeah, it's quite mind-blowing. You have to stay tuned, really, to hear the details of all of that and everything else we're talking about this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. Please get in touch with us. But first, here is the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks both. Good morning. 9:31, our top stories. The Chancellor is defending the British job market despite rising unemployment figures released today. Across the UK, unemployment rose by 0.1%, reaching 4.3% in July, while job vacancies fell to below 1 million. Jeremy Hunt says that remains below many of our international peers. Meanwhile, average growth in pay remained at a record high of 7.8%. Food inflation has fallen to its lowest level in more than a year, according to the latest figures. Kantar Group says grocery price inflation is down for the 6th month in a row, reaching 12.2%. That's compared to 17.5% back in March. However, 95% of consumers are still concerned about rising supermarket bills. Almost 1 in 3 female NHS surgeons say they've been sexually assaulted at work in the last 5 years. That's according to a survey by the British Journal of Surgery. 11 instances of rape were reported by those who took part in that study. Meanwhile, 29% of women say they've experienced unwanted physical advances. And Wilco has closed 24 of its stores across the UK, with hundreds of workers set for redundancy. The retailer is going into administration, with all 400 of the discount chain's shops set to close by October. Over 12,000 staff are likely to lose their jobs. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now let's get straight back to Andrew and Bev.
No, perfect.
So, very good morning. Now, questions have been raised over the UK's China policy after a British parliamentary researcher was arrested on suspicion of spying for Beijing.
But it's controversial because the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has said MPs must not name the alleged spy.
Well, earlier here on GB News, we asked Labour Minister Justin Madders what he thought about our future relationship with China and how that might look.
This has come out in the last 48 hours. We absolutely have to robustly challenge them over that, but we can't ignore them. We have to continue dealing with them. They're going to be a big part of the 21st century. There's no doubt about that. If we want to tackle climate change, we want to continue to see our economy grow, we will have to deal with them. But that doesn't mean that we have to accept that some of the things that they do are consistent with our values.
Well, former Health Minister Lord James Bethell joins us now in the studio. Good morning, James. Thank you for coming in. The controversy surrounding this alleged Chinese spy continues because the gentleman who was accused, who was on the front page of one of the newspapers yesterday, came out and defiantly said there is no truth to this. Do you think he should be named at this stage? Should the MPs be talking about who he is?
Bev, it's a real dilemma. We're all naturally very concerned about what the accusations are, but we have to be respectful of the legal process. The intelligence services have been emphatic. They do not want to have a discussion about his identity or about the accusations because that would disrupt their investigation. So I think we have to respect their intentions on this.
I hear that, James, but we're talking about China, which are laughing at us because they don't allow any discussion about anything if they don't like it because it's a police state. This is the mother of all parliaments. This man has been named on the front page of the Times with a photograph. They've done it again today. So we're all talking about it. You know who it is. Bev knows who it is. I know it is. People who've read the Times know who it is. People who've read the internet know who it is. But MPs aren't allowed to name him or debate it?
Well, I think you're right that China is laughing, and what they want is to sow suspicion and disruption in our parliament. So although the temptation is to try to dive in and discuss this person in particular, actually the most helpful thing we can do is to back off that temptation and to rise above it. Where I think we should be looking at is at the Foreign Agents Registration Scheme, which is deliberately created in order to bring transparency to the people who work within Parliament. And China should be a tier 1 country within that scheme.
How does that work? What does that mean?
What that means is that if you are taking money from either Chinese state organisations or Chinese companies, you have to register that contract and that connection. And so people can see what your connections are with a country like China.
Right. Can we ask you about this jaw-dropping story on the front page of the Times? You're a former health minister. This is based on a report from the Royal College of Surgeons. A third of female NHS surgeons have been sexually assaulted by a colleague over the past 5 years, some of them in the operating theatre, some of them during operations, and 11 of them report being raped. This is absolutely shattering.
It is awful. And it is striking that it's in the last 5 years. So this isn't historic complaints. This is a snapshot of what the NHS is like today. I have the greatest respect for our clinical professions, but there is a problem with the hierarchical and misogynistic nature of the culture in the NHS. I think that was a lot of what the nurses' strike was about, is that a lot of them are fed up with being treated as second-class citizens and to have this predatory behaviour. By men. And I think that it's often very localised. There are some institutions that treat these situations very well, but some do not. And the profession has to have a really long, hard look at itself and address this problem, I think.
Just to be clear, so this was an analysis done by the University of Exeter, the University of Surrey and the Working Party on Sexual Misconduct in Surgery. It's astonishing that it's taken so long for this to come out in a way. This, I imagine, as you say, it might be quite recent reports, but this must have been going on for decades within
it's well
surgeries.
known. I'm afraid to say that the tone of the workplace in the NHS, often very good, frequently very, very bad indeed. And it is one of the reasons why people get burnt out, why they often say that they love the work, but they hate the workplace. And it's this climate of hierarchy, of
power.
Male dominance.
It's about power, James, as well, because there's this joke, isn't there, that, you know, the surgeons are playing God, that they often feel that they have this power within, particularly within surgery. And clearly young trainee surgeons, particularly females, are becoming the victim of this. How do you stamp it out?
Well, I think that the problem is the NHS is a very federated organisation. There are 22,000 different organisations. The professions themselves, the royal colleges, need to address this. They need better training. Listen, we've had this problem in Parliament. I mean, I have some humility here. I have seen my own colleagues in Parliament treat women appallingly, and we are taking steps. It's quite tough. You have to go to boring, tedious, patronising training sessions to tell you how to behave towards your colleagues. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but it was good for me. That's the kind of stuff that surgeons need to do.
And there have been problems in Parliament, but James, this says 2/3 of women working in surgery report having been sexually harassed by a male colleague. 2/3?
I know. It's astonishing.
And but then also, when they do go to complain, being told that it might be harmful for their career, the surgeons are all powerful and probably best to just sweep it under the carpet. Within the NHS, that issue of taking complaints to a certain level and being then respected for making that complaint, that's a problem, even in an area that isn't related to sexual assault, isn't it?
Yes, because we have vested within the clinical professionals a huge amount of hierarchical power. And so the people with the greatest expertise are not always the best managers. They're not always the people who are going to drive that kind of modernisation and behavioural reform within the organisation. Yes, we have to address this, for sure.
1 in 3 UK medical students as well intend on emigrating to practice medicine elsewhere. That's heartening, isn't it? That they do all their training here and then they go and live in Australia.
Yeah, well, listen, the medical profession has always been quite international. People do travel around. A lot of people come to Britain for training and to improve their qualifications. A lot of Brits go overseas. And the idea of moving to Australia to work in a hospital and spend some time on the beach is very alluring. The actual numbers that move overseas, though, is not quite what it sounds. Don't forget, the medical profession are quite well paid in this country, and they do have gold-plated pensions that are very, very difficult to leave behind.
They wouldn't agree with that. That's why they've been on blooming strike for months.
Well, I've been on record, Andrew,
Consultants, junior doctors, nurses, they've all been on strike.
They feel that they are being underpaid. I think that the statistics show that actually the deal they get in the UK is quite a generous one. It's difficult to replicate.
Now, you say the numbers are not high, people going to warmer climes like the Caribbean or Australia, but shouldn't there be a system in place where they have to stay for at least 2 years after they've done their training so the taxpayer gets some of that reinvestment?
Listen, it's very tempting to think in those terms. There are two problems with it. One is that is called indented servitude. We kind of got rid of it with slavery quite a long time ago. And the other one is it doesn't help in the recruitment of the best people if you bring in restrictions like that. So we have looked at it very, very carefully.
Right.
But the practical... and from a moral point of view, one does feel frustrated that the taxpayer invests in someone's professional qualifications and then they leave the country. But the practicalities are that it doesn't work.
Well, let's also talk to you about disposable vapes, which we have discussed on this show before. Our audience feel really strongly about this. Some people will say that vapes have been a fantastic gateway to quitting smoking, but obviously that's how they started, but they have become something completely different, which is addicting a whole generation of teenagers to nicotine. And the government are now proposing to ban the disposable version. Good news story. That doesn't happen very often, does it, Lord Bethel?
No, they have moved really quickly on this. I agree. Listen, vapes have been fantastic. We've got a real problem with smoking. You don't see it in the professional classes, but 13% of the country do still vote. It's the second biggest killer, and it remains a source of great health inequality. So vaping is a huge modern benefit that is getting a lot of people off smoking. But kids vaping, that's a terrible idea. And these disposable vapes are clearly targeting kids. And Chris Whitty said that kids shouldn't smoke vapes, and I agree with that.
That's the former Chief Medical Officer. And, of course, Lord Bethel, we do not know, and we've had the bloke from the Vaping Association here admitting it on this programme, they do not know what damage the chemicals involved in vaping have on our bodies.
I know. So there is an unresolved question there, and it may yet show that vaping isn't good for you, but there's no evidence for that at the moment. I just don't think it's a good idea for children to be vaping. And I see teenagers in my kids' own schools who are semi-addicted, who are constantly
really
puffing away.
Constantly.
Got to be a bad
Why
idea.
do they make bubblegum flavoured vapes if they're not aimed at kids? I wanted to ask you one thing, and I cleared this with you before, Lord Bethel. It's Suicide Prevention Week, and you read a very moving and powerful piece in the Times earlier about the suicide of your own mother.
Yes. Well, I thought Lucy, who spoke earlier, would absolutely hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, that was Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist, was on Breakfast.
She was very good. My mother died when I was 10 years old. She was very lonely. My parents had been divorced because of her alcoholism. She lived in a small bedsit and had felt abandoned by the world. And that loneliness really, really mounted to the point where she took a hot bath one night and never woke up. And as a child, that hit me really, really hard. And the thing that hit me hard in particular was that no one wanted to talk about it. And I think my message would be that it's very, very important, particularly with children who have been hit by the suicide of a parent, to be more open and to discuss the problems and challenges.
Nobody at school talked to you about it, adults didn't talk to you about it. It was
everyone wanted to brush it under. It's so uncomfortable. I understand. It was the 1970s and we were, it was a different world then. And I understand why people didn't want to broach it because it was a troubling subject. But that's a mistake because you've got to allow children to grieve and you've got to answer the questions they've got.
You needed therapy.
I have had a huge amount of therapy.
As an adult?
Yeah.
But not as a child?
Correct.
Yeah. And did your dad ever talk to you about it?
He found it really difficult. He was personally heartbroken by the whole thing. He had loved my mother very much indeed, and he himself felt very abandoned. So he couldn't really talk about it. But I really needed others to step in and help me.
So your point now, people listening, people have to talk about this.
Yes, I'd like people to be much more open in talking, particularly with children.
Just on that, there was a discussion last week that we had about whether we need a minister for men, particularly as suicide remains the biggest killer of men under 45 in this country, which is a shocking statistic. Do you think we need a minister for men?
Well, I'm always a little bit suspicious about trying to create a minister for tiddlywinks. But yeah, there is clearly a problem with boys. I mean, I've been campaigning on pornography And that has given me a little bit of an insight into the confusion and difficulties that young men and boys have at the moment about what their role is, how they relate to women, how they relate sexually to their feelings. I think there is a bit of a crisis amongst men. And then at older, you know, I'm in middle age and the menopause, you know, you were talking about that earlier. I think this is another overlooked bit that men are really frustrated about finding a role for themselves later in life. So I don't know if minister is exactly the right thing to do, but for sure the men of Britain are feeling a little bit lost, I think.
I think you've just done a rather good application for the job.
There we go, Andrew.
There sits our First Minister for
I sent
Men,
my
Lord
reel
Bethel.
to Rishi.
Very good, yeah, absolutely. Lovely
Thanks,
to have
James.
you in
Good
the
to see you.
studio. Now, shall we try
Put your
again?
teeth in.
Dissatisfaction amongst the public about the government's handling of immigration. Guess what? Highest level since before the referendum.
That's right. 2/3 of those questioned across England, Scotland and Wales said that they are dissatisfied with the way politicians in charge are dealing with the issue.
Among Tory supporters, more than half are fed up because they feel not enough's being done to stop the Channel crossings.
While among Labour supporters, almost 3/4 are dissatisfied, mainly because they feel that immigration control creates a negative and fearful environment for migrants in Britain.
Well, we're going to talk to the immigration lawyer, Ivan Sampson. Ivan, morning. I guess I know which side of that argument you're on. You're on the Labour side there, aren't you?
Well, look, I'm on the side of sensible policies. I mean, the rapid spike in those people coming across small boats has left a sense of crisis amongst the public. And that's absolutely right, because at the moment, we don't have a control of our borders. It's worrying that people coming across the channel, some of whom don't have identity documents, we don't know where they come from, what their background is, and they're allowed to freely roam in the UK. I don't think that's a good approach to have. I think we need to make sure that we know exactly everyone, who they are, who's coming across.
But Ivan, the reason they don't...
You might be surprised that unless someone has a identity document, they should be detained until we can find out who they are.
They don't have identity documents. It's often because they've thrown them away, because they're not coming from a country where there is persecution and war and conflict. Did you hear that?
OK, I've lost.
Oh.
Can you hear us, Ivan?
I think we've lost Ivan Sampson. We'll try and get him back. Isn't that why they crossed the channel with no papers? Because they've slung them.
But isn't it... It is true, but isn't it funny when you look at these survey results that actually nobody is happy with the immigration system, particularly with the illegal immigration? Because even those who are, you know, pro more people coming to this country in terms of seeking refuge, they're frustrated by the fact that the backlog is such and the processing is so slow. Those who don't want as many people coming in such a short period of time are frustrated because the backlog is so long and the processing is so slow. So nobody is happy with it. I think Ivan's...
I think we might have Ivan Sampson back. Ivan, are you back? You are.
I am back.
Ivan, the point I was trying to make to you is you were talking about people crossing the channel with no ID papers. Isn't that because they've dumped them? Because they don't want people to realise they may come from a country with no conflict, no persecution, no war?
We can't control what people do. What we can control is the way we deal with them. And that's a problem. We need to have policies that address these issues. And I've advocated for a while now that unless you have ID papers, genuine ID papers, you should be detained. Now, the problem is there's insufficient accommodation to detain people. So the infrastructure's not there. The government's known about this problem for many years, and they haven't put in place policies and infrastructure to address them. Instead, the government's whole policies has been to blame the lawyers, blame the asylum seekers, blame the courts, blame the European Convention. And their eye is clearly focused on trying to get back in and saying it's not our fault, and that it's not helpful to have a government who is not seeking to address the problem, but the whole focus and policies are designed to get back into power. The sooner we have a general election, the better.
Ivan, what you're saying is encouraging these young men, who they are in the majority, 30-year-old young men, to dump their papers. That's what you're virtually encouraging it. Because they know then they'll
I'm saying the opposite.
Because they'll be detained here and they'll be kept here. So why wouldn't they do it? You're encouraging them to do that.
Not at all. The exact opposite, Andrew. look, we can't control what people do. What we can do is have policy to address the problem. Of course, they shouldn't do that, but, you know, people are desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. What we must do is have sensible policies. And as I said, unless you have a genuine identity document, you should be detained. We can't detain them because the system's broken, it's clogged. We don't have sufficient accommodation to detain them. That is a problem. That needs to be addressed.
OK, Ivan, thank you very much. Immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson there. This is in response to a survey which was founded by a think tank called Future Britain, and they have found that more and more people are dissatisfied with the immigration policy.
Two-thirds are dissatisfied. Only two-thirds? I'm amazed it's not 90%.
Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. Now, after taking questions at a Vietnam press conference, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, had this rather surprising announcement.
If you don't know what you want at the meeting, if you don't have a game plan, he may have a game plan. He just hasn't shared it with me. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed.
He's going to bed.
I have to say, I've covered some press conferences in my time with heads of state and prime ministers, foreign ministers. I've never had one ever announce to the press conference they're going to bed. Fortunately, he didn't tell us who with. I mean, presumably not the First Lady, because she's not with him.
No, exactly.
On his own, hopefully.
With his teddy bear, possibly. Greg Swenson is chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Good morning, Greg. He never fails to disappoint Biden, does he, with his gaffes? I mean, it would be funny, except it genuinely begs the question, who is making the decisions for America? Because it's clearly not him.
It's definitely not President Biden, and it's just another chapter in this sad history of the White House right now. You know, I think the Democrat Party, the legacy media, they're starting to come around and at least having to be honest about his cognitive issues and other challenges with his administration, you know, whether it's Kamala or the Biden family business or the economy or the border, the crime in big cities. I mean, it's really tragic what's going on there. And then you have these cognitive issues that are so obvious now. And KJB actually hooked him, you know, pulled him off of the podium when he was in Vietnam, and just abruptly ended the press conference because I think he was just going off on a tangent. And so they've gone from correcting his misstatements or you know, correcting the narrative after the fact. They've moved from that, you know, to just pulling him off the stage. I mean, it's really troubling.
What do you think is really going on, Greg, with the Democrat Party? Are they just keeping him there and hoping that they can, even if they have to sort of staple him to a cardboard cutout and roll him onto the stage, they just want to keep him there to the next election? Or do they want Kamala Harris to come in before that election and take over that presidential role, you know, de facto?
No, I think they're waiting. They're keeping him on there, like, you know, being there by Peter Sellers from 40 years ago, 50 years ago. You know, this is really a hoax of a presidency in many ways. You know, they put him in the chair on purpose in 2020, almost as a holding pattern. But Kamala is even weaker in the polls. So the last thing they want is Kamala to be president. I think at some point they will announce that he's not running for re-election. There's no way he can do this. The question is, do they do it now and allow for a proper primary process or nomination fight or election, or do they wait till next summer and then pull him and then just have a nomination at the convention? I think it looks like that's what they're trying to do. But either way, there's just it's just dishonest to think that he can make it to the nomination.
Fascinating. We haven't got time. We'd like to talk to you for longer.
Thank you, Greg. There's so much going on in American politics at the moment. It's so interesting.
I still don't think there should be a ban on age on presidential candidates, but I think they should have to undergo a cognitive test.
What do you think?
Yeah, what do you think? And still to come, more on the shocking report that 1 in 3 surgeons have been assaulted by a colleague.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. For many, there's a bit of a cooler feel around at the moment, with some rain across parts of England in particular, and also the risk of a little thunder later. Taking a look first thing, and yes, a cloudy, wet start across this central slice of England into southwest England as well. Through the morning, some of that rain across parts of Lincolnshire into East Anglia could be quite persistent and heavy at times. Meanwhile, in the far southeast, high humidity could allow for some heavy, perhaps even thundery downpours to develop as we go into the afternoon, whilst across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, a brighter picture, just a scattering of showers, though most places avoiding these. Highs lower than recently, but could get to around 24 or 25 Celsius in the southeast. Through the end of the day, we're going to continue to see a quite cloudy, wet picture across parts of the southeast. That rain will gradually clear away as we go through the night. Otherwise, quite a good deal of clear skies and a slack flow. Under this slack flow, temperatures are going to take a bit of a dip, a real contrast to last week. Some places across parts of Scotland could get close to freezing, perhaps a touch of grass frost, maybe even a localised air frost perhaps. First thing on Wednesday morning then, cloudy to start off in the southeast. Any rain will clear away quite quickly. Otherwise, a lot of dry, bright, sunny weather through a good chunk of the morning, but then things turn wet and windy from the northwest as we go into the afternoon due to a deep area of low pressure that's going to arrive later. Quite a cloudy picture compared to some recent days, and temperatures down a couple of degrees and feeling cooler in the winds.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, 12th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, is this the NHS's Me Too movement? 1 in 3 female surgeons say they've been assaulted by a colleague.
Don't mention the spy. That's the message from the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, warning MPs not to identify the alleged Chinese insider. How many more foreign agents have infiltrated your government?
Wages on the rise. They're surging at a record pace, and they've not been outstripped by inflation for the first time in nearly 2 years. Good news at last.
Doomed to fail. A shocking video emerges of French police partying rather than stopping migrants. Will we ever see an end to the small boats crisis? Get in touch with us this morning. GBViews at gbnews.com is the email. But first, here is Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom.
Many thanks. Good morning. 1 minute past 10, our top stories. The Chancellor is defending the British job market despite rising unemployment figures, which were released today. Across the UK, unemployment rose by 0.1%, reaching 4.3% in July. That's while job vacancies fell to below 1 million. Jeremy Hunt says that remains below many of our international peers. Meanwhile, average growth in pay remained at a record high of 7.8%. Shadow Business, Employment and Levelling Up Secretary Justin Madders says more needs to be done by the government.
There are strong economic headwinds that have been troubling the economy for some time. But I think one of the things we're very clear about is the only way we are going to get out of this mess we've been in really for 13 years now with stagnant growth is to actually turbocharge that and get us to be the highest economic growth in the G7. And that is going to be a huge task, but that is the only way we're going to get more money in people's pockets, better job security.
Food inflation has fallen to its lowest level in more than a year, according to the latest figures. Kantar Group says grocery price inflation is down for the 6th month in a row, reaching 12.2%. That's compared to 17.5% back in March. Despite that, 95% of consumers are still concerned about rising supermarket bills. Rail fares in England could rise by up to 8% next year. It comes as the government previously confirmed that next year's fare rises will be below the measure of inflation for July, which was 9%. This year's cap on train fares increased with Britain's average earnings growth for July last year, which was 5.9%. Well, as we've been hearing, almost 1 in 3 female NHS surgeons say they've been sexually assaulted at work in the last 5 years. That's according to a survey by the British Journal of Surgery. 11 instances of rape were reported by those who took part in that study. Meanwhile, 29% of women say they've experienced unwanted physical advances in the workplace, and more than 40% received uninvited comments about their body. Wilco has closed 24 of its stores across the UK today, with hundreds of workers set for redundancy. The retailer is going into administration, with all 400 of the discount chain's shops set to close by October. Over 12,000 staff are likely to lose their jobs. The company was unable to secure a deal to sell all of its shops, despite talks with HMV to buy 200. More than 50,000 school and council workers are voting on strike action in a dispute over pay. GMB members are being polled across 3,000 schools and local authorities in England and Wales. Teaching assistants, social workers and refuse collectors are just some of the union members who rejected a pay offer for this year. The ballot will close on the 24th of October, with walkouts possible as soon as November. Two people are set to appear in court as part of an ongoing terrorism investigation in Londonderry. The 26-year-old woman and a 48-year-old man have been charged with possession of firearms and explosives. Searches in Derry over the last several days have discovered a number of explosive devices as well as guns and ammunition. Meanwhile, two men, aged 22 and 41, have been released, while a 43-year-old man remains in custody. Stars of sport and reality TV will join a meeting at Number 10 to discuss online safety. It's as the Online Safety Bill returns to the Commons for its final stages. The planned law imposes new legal duties on big tech companies to crack down on online trolls. Michelle Donnellan, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, told us it will make the UK the safest place in the world to be online.
On making sure that illegal content is got rid of as part of our triple shield. The second shield is making sure that platforms actually enforce their terms and conditions, so you know what you're going to get when you sign up to one of these platforms and they can't treat different groups differently. And thirdly, that we're empowering adults to have more control over the content they see.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get straight back to Andrew and Bev.
Told they should not name the alleged insider by the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle.
So earlier on GB News, we spoke with Labour Minister Justin Matters about the arrested spy suspect, and here's what he had to say.
This has come out in the last 48 hours. We absolutely have to robust to challenge them over that, but we can't ignore them. We have to continue dealing with them. They're going to be a big part of the 21st century. There's no doubt about that. If we want to tackle climate change, we want to continue to see our economy grow, we will have to deal with them. But that doesn't mean that we have to accept that some of the things that they do are consistent with our values.
That was Justin Matters, the Shadow Labour Minister. We're delighted now to be joined by the Chief Executive and co-founder of Hong Kong Watch, Benedict Rogers. Benedict, we have talked before about China's appalling record in Hong Kong. The idea now that they've got one of their own, a spy in the midst of our very own parliament. We can't identify this person, alleged, but we can tell viewers and listeners of GB News it's not a Chinese person, it's a British person who went to a British public school as a son of a GP, that we can say. It's devastating if he has been spying for China.
It is absolutely devastating. Of course, it's not the first time that we've had this issue. You'll recall that just over a year ago, MI5 warned parliamentarians that Christine Lee, who they did name, was involved in influence and infiltration operations. And then, of course, we've had multiple warnings from the head of MI5 in various speeches about the threat China poses. We had the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament warning that China is carrying out a whole-of-state campaign in the United Kingdom for influence, including espionage. So it was not necessarily a surprise that there was another spy in Westminster, but as you say, what was a shock for all of us, particularly those of us who have encountered this alleged individual, is that he's, as you've said, he's not Chinese, he's British.
He worked, we know, with Tom Tugendhat, who's now the Security Minister, was seen potentially as the next Defence Secretary. One wonders now if that's why he didn't get the job, because this bloke was arrested in March. Astonishing it didn't come out before. He also worked with Alicia Kearns, the head of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. These are powerful, influential people. Could they potentially have given him classified information?
I don't know what information he had access to, and I wouldn't want to speculate. I have a very high regard for both Tom Tugendhat and Alicia Kearns, who've been really leading voices in pointing out for a long time both the threat that China poses to our freedoms and indeed speaking out on the human rights crisis in China, including Hong Kong. So I'm quite certain that they, as soon as they realized there was a problem, they would have been very robust in rooting out the source of that problem, and I wouldn't put any blame on them. But I don't have any idea what access of information he would have had.
We had noises yesterday from a couple of politicians, such as Kemi Badenoch and I think Suella Braverman, saying that we need to have a relationship with China in order to reach our net zero ambitions. Do you feel that we've got our priorities right there? What is our relationship like with China? How would you characterise it? How necessary is it?
I think we put far too much emphasis on the relationship. I'm not one who would say we shouldn't talk to China. Of course we should. Even at the height of the Cold War, we talked to the Soviet Union. But the question is not whether to engage, but how. And for too long, we've been kowtowing to Beijing on this question of net zero. I mean, yes, of course, climate change is a major issue. I question really whether China is a reliable partner in that, both because I'm not sure they honour their promises in that regard, but also because, for example, some of the technology that we need to address net zero is manufactured in China and made by Uyghur slave labour in Xinjiang. So do we want to tackle climate change at the cost of being accomplices to a genocide? I don't think we do. And do we want to do it at the cost of surrendering our national security and freedom? I don't think we should. So I think, yes, we need to find ways to talk to China, but we should also diversify our relationships and reduce our dependency on China and find other parts of the world to source the materials we need, whether it's for net zero or anything else.
Do you think, Benedict, that people watching this programme and listening to this programme are entitled to know the name of this person who was arrested back in March, bearing in mind the Foreign Secretary was in China meeting Chinese officials, ministers, only last week? Are they entitled to know the Speaker's blocked MPs from naming him?
I understand there are legal reasons, and I wouldn't want to do anything that would prejudice a prosecution, because if this individual is guilty, I want a prosecution to succeed and to proceed with due process. Having said that, I think that people who are or who may be directly affected by this case ought to have been informed privately. I can understand why the Speaker may not want people to talk about it publicly or to name him publicly, but people like, including myself, who have encountered this individual. Some of my colleagues have met with him fairly often, and we may well have shared information with him that we would not have done it had we known the concerns. So I think people like us ought to have been briefed privately in advance. The first I knew about it was when, just shortly before the Sunday Times broke the story.
Yeah. OK, thank you very much. Co-founder of Hong Kong Watch, Benedict Rogers there.
Absolutely fascinating. I do still wonder if an MP is going to think to hell with the Speaker, particularly if they're standing down at the next election, get up and name the person. The Speaker will punish them by not calling them to speak in a debate, probably for months and months. But if they feel that strongly that Chinese Parliament would never allow this person to be named, but we're the British Parliament.
But what would be the benefit of that, though?
Well, having a proper debate and discussion, because many people who get arrested get named. And the old idea, remember when people who are involved in sex cases, please want the name out there, because they say, have the names come forward? That's
no, but I get it in that situation. I'm just not sure whether anybody would go, oh, that guy, I gave him my classified Chinese information, and maybe I shouldn't have. Because if they want to know who he is, it's on the front page of the paper.
I just think it becomes ridiculous when he's been named in the Times 2 days running. He's all over the internet. So why on earth can't MPs discuss it in the Parliamentary chamber? The horse is bolted.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, I think this is some good news. Workers' wages outstripped the pace of inflation for the first time in over a year in July. Liam Halligan is here. Why am I so sort of sceptical about the fact that it might be good news, Liam? Is this because we never have any genuinely good news?
No, I think it's because, as Napoleon said, there's never a one-handed economist, is there? It's always on the other hand, on the one hand, on the other. Look, this is pretty good news, I guess. Between May and July, pay across the economy went up by 7.8% compared to May and July the previous years. And guess what? That's higher than July inflation, which was 6.8%. So that means what we call real wages, wages above inflation, are actually growing now, which is good news.
Does that not encourage more inflation if we're having more money in our pockets?
Potentially, but at least you're getting the economy moving. At least you're getting people spending. Let's just have a quick look at the numbers. There is May, July regular pay up 7.8%. July inflation was 6.8%. Now, this ties into what we call the triple lock, right? The triple lock, it means there's going to be an 8.5% rise in the basic state pension, we think. Why is that? Because 8.5% is the pay growth number, including bonuses. That's why it's above 7.8%. And the basic state pension goes up either by pay growth, the inflation number in September, which is out for August, which is out later this month, or 2.5%, whichever is the greater. If the basic state pension does go up by 8.5%, Andrew and Bev, that will be a rise of £692 a year. The basic state pension, then £8,814. Handy money for the elderly, but low by international standards.
Yeah, and of course there's great row about this going on at Parliament because when the Prime Minister was challenged about the triple lock in G20, he wouldn't confirm whether it would stay. However, at the number 10 briefing on Monday, they said it's still government policy.
Yeah, I think there's a real debate about this going on in Cabinet. The Tories know they need desperately to appeal to younger voters who are trying to get on the housing ladder, younger voters who think all the baby boomers are taking all the money, and they're right in many cases. And so is it really worth spending billions, potentially tens of billions of pounds on the triple lock when you could use some of that money for younger voters?
Because they vote Tory.
Yeah, because they vote Tory.
Is this wage increase is it the start of the post-Brexit success story? And what I mean by that is I can't get a builder, I can't get a plumber, I can't get an electrician, I've got tons of work needs doing in my house, there's nobody available to do it. Are we now having people who have born here, lived here, done those trades, being able to charge more because there's a labour shortage? And is that a good thing in the long run?
So I'm very much from a building background. All my family are...
Oh, great. Come round, I need you.
London Irish builders. I'm the one that got away. Yeah, there is a tightness when it comes to looking for skilled trades, plastering, plumbing. I know that. It's very difficult in London and it's in many other cities and even in country areas as well. Lots of things going on. I think there's a demographic thing. A lot of the sort of skilled tradesmen in particular, they're in their 50s and their 60s. For quite a long time, a lot of people went to university rather than learning a trade. I think that's part of the problem. I think Brexit is part of the problem too, because just as the Irish came in the 50s and 60s and 70s to build Britain, basically, we've had the Poles, the Moldovians, the Lithuanians, and a lot of those guys have made a lot of money and have now gone back, and it's harder for their counterparts, their successors, to come over.
So is it then, like you say, those guys in their 50s and 60s who are still working in those trades who are now charging more, and is that partly what we're seeing? Because I think a lot of people will be on board with that.
They are charging more, and there's going to be an adjustment, and these adjustment takes a long time. You can't just watch a YouTube video and suddenly be a plumber.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a long apprenticeship. Electrician, carpenter, even a general labourer on a building site. That's a pretty skilled job. You can't just come in off the street.
And yet the number of apprenticeships fell in the last year.
I think it's like a perennial thing here in the UK, isn't it? Just as we're really good at queuing and we're really good at not winning Wimbledon very often, we're really bad for some reason at vocational training and apprenticeships. And it is a generational thing. It didn't used to be like that. And the German economy is in the doldrums at the moment, but they do have a lot to teach us when it comes to vocational education.
Should we crow just a little bit about the fact the German economy is now the basket case of Europe, when they were so vile about Britain daring to vote to leave the European Union, and our economy is now predicted to grow quicker, and that's the European Union saying that?
Germany is the European Union's economic powerhouse. There may be some, Schadenfreude, as the Germans would say. We don't really have a word for that in English, do we? But look, a lot of our trade still is with the European Union. If you add up imports and exports, it's still about half our trade. And it doesn't really do us any good if the economic powerhouse of the European Union is not firing on all cylinders, and Germany isn't. I mean, there was a study out overnight, which I tweeted it caused some controversy on social media, saying that Britain has now overtaken France to be the world's fifth, I think, biggest manufacturer, which is a real change. And our car industry is doing pretty well. There is lots of stuff going on, but I still think the sense that we haven't had real wages positive for so long, that's really hammered the consumer sector, that's hammered investment, that's one reason why the economy's been so sluggish.
Good news. Why do we never hear ministers talking about it?
I don't know.
Why don't they? What's wrong with them?
The comms operation seems to be a mess. It is good news. I think Bev's take on it is the right one.
Yeah.
This is going to take time, but at least tradesmen based here are getting now a fair rub of the green and a bit more money. It will take time for them to come forward, and so we can get our stuff done. But look, there's another aspect to this. This real wage growth is quite punchy. This may be something that causes the Bank of England, when it meets on the 21st of September, to put in another interest rate rise. I don't actually think the Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank, is going to do another interest rate rise. Or if it does, it will do it and say that's absolutely our last one. In terms of interest rates, what really matters now is the August inflation number. Will it come down from 6.8% in July?
Isn't it going to go up slightly?
That's the day before, on the 20th of September. And it may be, Andrew, because of those petrol price rises, it may be there's a little uptick caused by the fact we've got a oil price spike. Oil prices are up 30% since June. Almost nobody's noticed.
I know.
That meant we had the sharpest increases in petrol and diesel prices in August in any month in 23 years.
Amazing.
And this is hardly causing a ripple across the media, and yet motorists know it, van drivers know it.
Blaming Saudis.
And that could be the thing that, in the end, pushes interest rates up again.
Well, there we go. We started out thinking it was positive. I told you I had a little bit of scepticism, and we end there on a negative note. Right. Still to come, thanks, Liam. Nearly a third of female NHS surgeons say that they have been sexually assaulted by a colleague over the past 5 years, according to a major study released today. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. For many, there's a bit of a cooler feel around at the moment, with some rain across parts of England in particular, and also the risk of a little thunder later. Taking a look first thing, and yes, a cloudy, wet start across this central slice of England into southwest England as well. Through the morning, some of that rain across parts of Lincolnshire into East Anglia could be quite persistent and heavy at times. Meanwhile, in the far southeast, high humidity could allow for some heavy, perhaps even thundery downpours to develop as we go into the afternoon, whilst across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, a brighter picture, just a scattering of showers, though most places avoiding these. Highs lower than recently, but could get to around 24 or 25 Celsius in the southeast. Through the end of the day, we're going to continue to see a quite cloudy, wet picture across parts of the southeast. That rain will gradually clear away as we go through the night. Otherwise, quite a good deal of clear skies and a slack flow. Under this slack flow, temperatures are going to take a bit of a dip, a real contrast to last week. Some places across parts of Scotland could get close to freezing, perhaps a touch of grass frost, maybe even a localised air frost perhaps. First thing on Wednesday morning then, cloudy to start off in the southeast. Any rain will clear away quite quickly. Otherwise, a lot of dry, bright, sunny weather through a good chunk of the morning, but then things turn wet and windy from the northwest as we go into the afternoon due to a deep area of low pressure that's going to arrive later. Quite a cloudy picture compared to some recent days, and temperatures down a couple of degrees and feeling cooler in the winds.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From Midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
10:26 with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So it's more disturbing news this morning. Almost 1 in 3 female surgeons in the NHS have been sexually assaulted.
The report's authors warn a misogynistic culture in hospital is posing a significant risk to patient safety, not least to the women surgeons.
That's right. Well, let's go now to Lucy Johnston, Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express. Morning, Lucy. Morning, lovely to see you.
Hello, good morning.
What a shocking story that female surgeons are being sexually assaulted, often within the surgery room, even whilst performing surgery themselves. Just explain to our viewers and listeners what this story is about, Lucy.
Well, the survey was about 1,400 people answered. It was an online anonymous survey of female surgeons. We don't know, or I don't know, how many people were actually asked or approached, but of those numbers, up to a third said they had been sexually assaulted during work or around work. It's very difficult to know. There's no definition that I can see of what that sexual assault means or how it's characterised. So there are a few unanswered questions there. Of course, it's very alarming. It doesn't say over what time period either. So there are some questions to be answered. And nor does it sort of compare it to other professions. So we don't know, for example, how nurses are faring in the workplace, although they have made, there is some movements from nurses to say that they too are suffering in a sort of hierarchical structure.
Isn't it?
I say we talked to Lord Bethell, the former health minister, and he blamed the male hierarchical structure for these problems. And also in that report, of course, it does identify that 11 report being raped. That's shocking too.
Yeah, and it's, it is. I mean, clearly, I would be very surprised if they were actually raped in theatre. Yeah. So it's hard to know, how that compares to other workplaces, other offices. And the other question mark is, there's no validation of whether the allegations are true or not. We don't know, for example, the survey, only certain numbers of people answered the survey, so we don't know of all the people that didn't answer whether they had not experienced. So it's there's a lot of unanswered questions. It was online, it was anonymous, and it's hard to verify, and it's hard to know how it compares to other professions. But that said, it is alarming, it is really shocking, and I'm sure there will be some kind of movement to try and expose or highlight these poor practices. I'm sure, this will potentially lead to more awareness of the problem.
Yeah. We were also reading this morning, Lucy, about the number of medics leaving the UK, training here, and then wanting to go and work overseas. A study of 10,500 people from UK's medical schools found that a third of them, 32%, are intending to leave to go and practice in Australia, New Zealand, America and Canada. I guess given how difficult it is to work in the NHS here, who can blame them?
Well, absolutely. But just to note, doctors have always left the NHS. Well, for 30 years, doctors have left the NHS. And looking back at the figures since about 2015, those numbers have remained pretty stable. And there's a difference between saying you're going to leave and actually doing it. And even the latest figures that we have, 2022, show that the numbers are pretty much staying average. There was a fall in numbers during the pandemic, so any increase has just been in relation to that fall. It's pretty much stayed steady. There are people who do leave, often come back for family reasons, and there are good reasons for leaving temporarily the NHS to see how things work elsewhere and bring back possibly improvements or look at how things aren't being done so well. But that said, if it's true and if a third of doctors are possibly going to leave, and we don't know that it is. It's all very well to say you're thinking of leaving. There are calls for, some people have, some MPs have called for there to be a tie-in. So because the government heavily subsidises doctor training, so that's the taxpayer, some people have said that it's only right that doctors should pay back some of that money, or else the government should agree to pay back some of the student debt, because they do come out with quite a lot of debt. I think it's about £100,000 over those 5-6 years, that they should pay back a portion of that every year to sort of tie them in and keep them here. So there are many things that, could be looked at if this really is a problem. We also recruit from overseas, so we can get more people, say, from the Indian subcontinent. So the figure that the BMA has come out with this survey is, again, alarming, but it doesn't necessarily show the whole picture.
OK, thank you, Lucy. Lucy Johnston, their Health and Social Affairs Editor at The Sunday Express. I'm going to get to your views in just a moment. I'm sorry we haven't read you out any of them yet, but first of all, here is the news with Ray Addison.
Good morning, 32 minutes past 10, our top stories. The Chancellor is defending the British job market despite rising unemployment figures released today. Across the UK, unemployment rose by 0.1%, reaching 4.3% in July, while job vacancies fell to below 1 million. Jeremy Hunt says that remains below many of our international peers. Meanwhile, average growth in pay remained at a record high of 7.8%. Food inflation has fallen to its lowest level in more than a year, according to the latest figures. Kantar Group says grocery price inflation is down for the 6th month in a row, reaching 12.2%. That's compared to 17.5% back in March. Despite that, 95% of consumers are still concerned about rising supermarket bills. Regulators may have breached environmental law by allowing water companies to discharge sewage outside of exceptional circumstances. That's according to the government watchdog. Normally, it's only allowed following unusually heavy rain to prevent flooding people's homes. However, the Office for Environmental Protection says DEFRA, the Environment Agency and Ofwat may have misinterpreted the law. A DEFRA spokesperson says we do not agree with the OEP's initial interpretations. Almost 1 in 3 female NHS surgeons say they've been sexually assaulted at work by a colleague in the last 5 years. That's according to a survey by the British Journal of Surgery. 11 instances of rape were also reported. Meanwhile, more than 40% say they've received uninvited comments about their body. And Wilco has closed 24 of its stores across the UK, with hundreds of workers set for redundancy. The retailer is going into administration, with all 400 of the discount chain's shops set to close by October. Over 12,000 staff are likely to lose their jobs. The company was unable to secure a deal to sell all of its shops, despite talks with HMV to buy 200. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's take a look at the latest markets. The pound will buy you $1.2471 and €1.1630 euros. Price of gold, £1,539 and 76 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,528 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Wilco's is closing. It is really sad. They're going to be about 12,000 jobs will probably be lost. We're going to be heading over to Wilco's.
It's another blow for the high street, it really is.
Yeah, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:39. You're with Britain's News and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Let's have a look.
Lots of emails coming in.
Yes, thank you for getting in touch this morning. We've been talking about the NHS and the idea that maybe doctors, and you're quite a fan of that, aren't you, that they should have to work here for a while before they leave to go.
It would be written into their contract. They've got to do at least 2 years after they've trained.
Well, Dan on email does not agree with you. He says the suggestion of requiring doctors to work for several years in the NHS to repay part of the cost of 6 years. Oh, no, he does agree with you.
Quite right.
Is fair.
Good.
Lord Bethel,
well done, Dan.
likening this to indented servitude is absolutely ridiculous. Doctors
He said he's going back to slavery.
Doctors are still being well paid in the NHS. They're not slaves. Equally, his argument that this would affect recruitment is crazy. We don't want to train people who just want to emigrate for money as soon as they're qualified. Yeah. And Ted has said if doctors want to leave the country once they've qualified, that's OK. It's a free country. But any loans they've received for tuition, etc., should be repaid in full before their departure. It's our money, not the government's.
And we should always remember that when people talk about government money, public money, it's our money, your money.
No such thing as just government's money.
No, exactly.
Right, we are...
Wilco.
We're going to talk about Wilco's now. The administrator, PwC, has confirmed that all Wilco stores will close by early October.
There's going to be redundancies now for all 12,500 Wilco workers after this bid to save the company failed. The 90-year-old retailer is going to close all 52 branches from today until Thursday.
Yeah. So we're joined now by GB News West Midlands reporter Jack Carson and East Midlands reporter Will Hollis. Jack, I understand that you're at a store that's due to close today.
Yeah, that's right. This is the store in Stafford, in Staffordshire. It's one of the 24 that are closing their doors today. Big signs on the windows saying that this is the final day that they're going to be open. Lots of people here that have been walking by this morning that I've been chatting to, very sad and disappointed, and actually still in quite a state of shock that Wilco, such a massive brand on the high street, is closing its doors, and this one is closing its doors for the time. So lots of still shock within the community, but of course as retail has changed over the years, of course there were such a big rise for this store in the 1990s with so many stores on the high streets, but as consumer habits changed, as out of town retail parks became ever more popular and
are we losing
kinds
Jack?
Of areas, and of course
we're losing you, Will. Because, no, Jack, we're losing you because it's a bad line. So let's go to Will Hollis. Will, I think you're at the HQ, are you, of Wilco?
Yes, the HQ here in Worksop in Bassett Lawn, North Nottinghamshire. You might see in the background occasionally a HGV coming in and out of this distribution centre because it is still very much a working distribution centre, and there's a massive row of warehouses in the background. But by Friday, this warehouse, PwC, the administrators, have said is expected to close. Now we're seeing shops on the high street close today, 24 Wilco stores today, with a similar number closing on Thursday, another 100 or so next week. But by the end of this month, and certainly as we go deeper into October, the stores that are fed by this distribution centre, the 400 or so of them, are going to be closed for good. It is hard to think about, especially for a lot of people that have spent their lives shopping at Wilco's.
Jack Carson, our reporters, thank you very much. Now, we are joined in the studio by Nigel Nelson and Tonya Buxton this morning. Can we just talk about the changing shape of our high street both? Nigel, let me come to you first. Yeah. Wilco's, obviously, it's an old family business. It's one of those shops. It sells pick and mix. It sells, you know, a new colander if you want one. It's stationery, all the sort of bits and bobs that families need for their homes. I think this is really sad.
It is sad. I mean, it's terribly sad for the 12,500 workers who lose their jobs because of it. I mean, one of the problems seems to be that Wilco tried to change that business model and start doing other things instead of the basic stuff they were doing. So you do wonder if they'd stuck to the traditional way of trading, whether or not this would have happened.
Yeah.
And there are a whole lot of obviously other problems about finance and so on. But it is something else that actually destroys the high street. I mean, that if you can't go to stores like that, you are going to end up going to out-of-town supermarkets because you can get pretty much all you need.
And you're going to buy everything online and you're going to be lonely in your bedroom on your own, aren't you, Sonia?
Exactly that. Lockdowns made people that wouldn't normally buy online, and they saw that it's more efficient and it's easier. And so they carried on buying online. Something happened in the summer, I've got to tell you. So we were in one of the Greek islands, and it shows you like a high street effect, that we tried on this dress and this place, and then we saw it online. It was cheaper. And my daughter was saying, oh, don't worry, we'll buy it online. I said, no. We've gone in here, we've tried it on, we're going to pay the extra, I don't know, 30 euros that it was in the shop, because we've gone in there, we've tried it on, we've felt the fabric, we've done that. And that's what people don't realise, that you get such a great benefit from going into a shop, feeling something, touching it, getting it, and then buying it.
And their advice.
And their advice and human interaction.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know it's difficult when things are cheaper online, but we somehow have to shop with the principles in mind as well.
Yes.
Sometimes, in order to just keep our high street going, keep it alive.
We need to stop making it a nightmare to be shopping in the high street. Parking charges.
I was going to say parking is the other problem.
The real problem.
You've got to be able to get there for a start.
And we've got all these wretched low emission zones and ULEZ, which I know you support, Nigel, making it even more difficult.
Well, the pedestrian precinct cause a problem more than you
But also,
it makes it difficult.
What's happening now is that the shops, the independents, there are no independents left, and all that's popping up, I know from my high street, there are so many betting shops there, and then charity shops, and it just has this run-down, horrid feel. And people don't want to then go into the high street and look at people and smile in the day. No. We have to fight for our high street.
Yeah, I know. Right, this Chinese spy...
I'd rather talk about
I'm not a big fan of this Chinese spy story. I think it's a bit stupid.
It's an amazing survey showing 2/3 are fed up with the government on immigration.
Who are the third that are happy with the government's immigration policy? That's what I want to know. I mean, it's mind-blowing. There are a third of people. But I think, do you know who I think it is? It's the Greenies and the lefties. And
it's people like Nigel.
People like Nigel who don't have any common sense or understanding at all.
Because you and I, there are too many people coming in legally and far too many people coming in illegally, because he worries about, it gives a bad impression for Britain if we're hostile to migrants.
Look, if you look at these figures, I mean, they are really all over the place. 43% say that immigration has a positive effect on Britain, which overall I think it does. 37%,
if it's managed.
37% say it's negative.
And it isn't managed.
Well, yeah, except that 48% are talking about wanting it reduced. So these figures don't quite come together. If you think that immigration is positive, and overall it is, I mean, you're talking obviously about legal immigration, and I know the figures are really high, but a lot of that's been from Hong Kongers, Ukrainians,
thousands crossing the channel illegally.
Well, then we're in a different area of immigration. First, they are not illegal. It's not illegal to cross the English Channel.
They are crossing the channel illegally without any ID papers, which they've chucked over.
No, if they land here without ID papers, that's the illegal bit.
Yeah.
That is then trumped by being an asylum seeker.
They're not asylum seekers, they're economic migrants.
Well, hang on. If they come here and they actually claim asylum, then whether you like it or not, they are asylum seekers.
I don't like it.
I don't like it at all. And the main thing is that, you know, we understand. Look, I'm an immigrant's child. Both my parents were immigrants. They came over, they made a life for themselves, they've paid taxes throughout their whole life, and I'm living here. So immigration is a good thing, but not all immigration is equal. So, you know, yes, of course, we want more doctors and qualified people to come and work in this country and help this country progress. But, you know, it's not going to be the same for a low-paid worker, and it's definitely not going to be the same for the people that are coming over illegally. Whether, you know, it's just not the same thing.
Tony, we do need actually low-paid workers. I mean, one of the problems about food inflation is because we've got rid of free movement, we are not getting the people who would normally come from EU countries to pick fruit and vegetables. And the result of that is we can pay them 20% less. The result of that is that we've got to employ people here to go and do it at much higher wages, and that contributes to the extra costs that when you
I understand that, but there's other migration that we need to get control of. If you're a student here, you come to study here, and then you're allowed to work for how many years? 2 to 4 years on top, and often then they end up staying here,
bringing their families,
bringing their families to study. I mean, that's mind blowing to me.
Well,
you've come over to some
students who, and then they're not sort of 17, 18. Some of them are an awful lot older with families. And again,
too bad. Sometimes you might have to make choices.
To attract top people from abroad to come and study here, boosting our universities, boosting
No, because I think it's exclusion of our homegrown
students. You can't leave your family at home. If you were asked to go and work in Australia, would you want to leave everyone you love behind?
But it's a choice. Yeah. It is a choice that you make.
And actually, these people who about picking food in the fields, we've got how many people on full-time unemployment benefits, Nigel? They're not all... We've got 2.5 million on incapacity benefit. I don't buy it.
No, I know,
a lot of them have got anxiety issues, nervous issues. The mental health issues.
Okay,
I don't buy it.
But
they're swinging
from a farmer's point of view...
They're swinging the lead,
The farmer can pay an East European 20% less than they would pay a British worker. That then, whether you think that's right or wrong, that keeps food prices down. So if you employ a British worker, you must employ them on minimum wage, and your food prices go up, which is exactly what has happened.
You have to employ European... People from Eastern Europe have to be paid the minimum wage too.
But it's still 20% less than they would get if they were a British worker.
But that's not the point of immigration, is it? That's not the point of what's going on. It's out of control because what's happening, especially with the people coming over in the boats, that they are taking the dentist appointments, the doctor's appointments, the accommodation,
well said.
Student accommodation for British people that have worked very hard. So something has to be fixed. So this third of people who are not dissatisfied, what are they satisfied with?
Well, they're presumably immigrants.
Well, there you go.
There we are.
Maybe the third of people who are happy with it are here.
This is a representative sample of the country.
And of course, Nigel's part of the third.
Well, I haven't actually replied to this poll, but I mean, had I done so, yes, I probably would be.
Oh.
But what are you happy about, Nigel?
Well, the whole thing is what I'm not unhappy about. First of all, it's divided into two things. I'm not too worried about people who come here legitimately on visas. That's fine.
Do you think the 700,000 in a year is about right or too high?
Well, it's not a question of it. I don't think you can set targets on this. And
I do.
That was artificially inflated by the Ukrainian settlements.
And Hong Kong.
700,000 is a big city.
Yes, I know it is.
Bigger than Bristol.
Yes, I know it is.
What, every year?
The figures were artificially inflated. There was also COVID came in the middle of that, so an awful lot more people came as soon as COVID was over. So those aren't standard figures. I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, let's limit it to 200,000 or something like that. The Tories make...
I don't understand why that can't be done.
Targets that don't work.
I could.
I think we do have
The Tories used to have a target of low tens of thousands.
That's right, and it never worked. It never worked.
Well, they should have made it work.
But you can't make it work if you want people to fill jobs in this country or bring people in to do specialist kind of work.
We don't need Lithuanians to make coffee.
And so that's why that part never worked. When it comes to dealing with the cross-channel migrants, yes, you're right, that's a whole different ball game. And if only Rishi Sunak would come up with something reasonable to deal with it, we might be able to control the problem.
We've got time to talk about middle-aged Love Island.
That's a lovely look at that topic.
Now, Tonya, your daughter Antigone was on the young people's Love Island.
She was, for all of 6 days, and she behaved so impeccably.
She behaved so impeccably that she was out on week one because she wasn't doing the kind of things people want
yes,
to
exactly.
do on those
Pretty much.
She'd been brought up well. But this new series has just started of middle-aged Love Island. Quite like the idea of it. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. I've been reading about it. I've seen some clips of it, and it just makes my stomach clench.
Does it?
Yes, because the thing is, I think it's actually quite cute. It's quite a sweet little show. But the fact of the matter that the children... I imagine if I was single and my child had... One of my children... Oh, gosh, imagine if my sons, that'd be even worse, had nominated me to go in, and they're watching my behaviour, and they're watching the parents... flirting with someone. Oh, my gosh. I feel the kind of tension of the kids, and the parents don't know
that they're watching.
The children are watching them. They won't find that out till they come out.
It is extraordinary.
I think it's scary. I mean, the whole thing, that, apart from sort of things like for the children, how embarrassing it is, the dad dancing, you see it translated into this. There's also the other side of it. I mean, the tragedy of somebody who's lost their wife to cancer, is going on the first date and can't cope with it, and your children are watching that. I find that bit sort of makes me shudder.
It's a weird form of voyeurism, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, well, but aren't they all? Aren't all those shows
I suppose
kind of voyeurism?
But I've never watched the other Love Island, but this one has more of an appeal.
The point of the younger Love Island as well is that they've all got these incredible bodies, haven't they? They've got no fat on them, any of them, and all the boys have been in the gym. Middle-aged Love Island, does everyone have a little bit of middle-aged spread? Do we know in the pictures, is it normal bodies?
It's quite normal bodies, actually, kind of dad bods and mum bods. And
so there's hope for Nigel.
But it's very nice.
Hope for you, Nigel.
He's
I could actually.
Where's your married to a lovely woman.
You might have to have a word with your wife.
Tonya and Nigel, we need to move on. Right, in the next few minutes, we're going to go back to the shocking story that we mentioned earlier about 1 in 3 female NHS surgeons having been sexually assaulted at work. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. For many, there's a bit of a cooler feel around at the moment, with some rain across parts of England in particular, and also the risk of a little thunder later. Taking a look first thing, and yes, a cloudy, wet start across this central slice of England into southwest England as well. Through the morning, some of that rain across parts of Lincolnshire into East Anglia could be quite persistent and heavy at times. Meanwhile, in the far southeast, high humidity could allow for some heavy, perhaps even thundery downpours to develop as we go into the afternoon, whilst across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, a brighter picture, just a scattering of showers, though most places avoiding these. Highs lower than recently, but could get to around 24 or 25 Celsius in the southeast. Through the end of the day, we're going to continue to see a quite cloudy, wet picture across parts of the southeast. That rain will gradually clear away as we go through the night. Otherwise, quite a good deal of clear skies and a slack flow. Under this slack flow, temperatures are going to take a bit of a dip, a real contrast to last week. Some places across parts of Scotland could get close to freezing, perhaps a touch of grass frost, maybe even a localised air frost, perhaps. First thing on Wednesday morning then, cloudy to start off in the southeast. Any rain will clear away quite quickly. Otherwise, a lot of dry, bright, sunny weather through a good chunk of the morning, but then things turn wet and windy from the northwest as we go into the afternoon due to a deep area of low pressure that's going to arrive later. Quite a cloudy picture compared to some recent days, and temperatures down a couple of degrees and feeling cooler in the winds.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
And we're going to get more on that report, which says most voters, 2/3, are fed up to the back teeth of the government's useless inability to get to grips with immigration. We're going to be talking to a human rights lawyer, David Haig.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From Midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read by superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From Midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, 12th of September. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Is this the NHS's Me Too moment? 1 in 3 female surgeons say that they've been assaulted by a colleague.
And don't mention the spy. That's the message from the Speaker, Lindsay Hall, telling MPs don't dare identify the alleged Chinese insider. How many more potential foreign agents have infiltrated Parliament?
Migration mess with both legal and illegal migration at record highs. Many of us are fed up with the government's handling of the issue. It's now at its highest level of dissatisfaction since before the referendum.
And no surprise there if you were saying to Tonya Buxton, who are the 2/3 are dissatisfied? Who are the third are satisfied with the record?
Immigrants.
Yeah, it's a disaster. Record numbers of people coming in legally, nearly 700,000. Yeah. That's a big city. And record numbers crossing the channel illegally.
That was those XL bully dogs we were discussing as well yesterday. We're going to be talking about that in a little while. Tonya had her own experience with them actually only this week. So don't go anywhere. We'll bring you all the very latest on that and lots more this morning. First though, Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Our top stories this hour. The Chancellor is defending the British job market despite rising unemployment figures released today. Across the UK, unemployment rose by 0.1%, reaching 4.3% in July, while job vacancies fell to below 1 million. Jeremy Hunt says that remains below many of our international peers. Shadow Business, Employment and Levelling Up Secretary Justin Madders says more needs to be done.
There are strong economic headwinds that have been troubling the economy for some time. But I think one of the things we're very clear about is the only way we are going to get out of this mess we've been in really for 13 years now with stagnant growth is to actually turbocharge that and get us to be the highest economic growth in the G7, and that is going to be a huge task, but that is the only way we're going to get more money in people's pockets, better job security.
Well, meanwhile, the latest ONS figures show that average growth in pay remained at a record high of 7.8%. Now, under the current triple lock, that means pensioners could be set for a bumper state pension increase next April. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has refused to commit to the triple lock if Labour come to power.
When we're in government, when we run up to the general election, when we've seen the finances, we will make sure that people are better off under Labour. We will not make spending commitments when we don't know what the circumstances are. But the last Labour government took over 1 million pensioners out of poverty, and the next Labour government will ensure that pensioners and children and everyone in the UK can get on. But we won't do that if we've got stagnation and we don't have a growth strategy like this government has failed to do at the moment.
Food inflation has fallen to its lowest level in more than a year, according to the latest figures. Kantar Group says grocery price inflation is down for the 6th month in a row, reaching 12.2%. That's compared to 17.5% back in March. Despite that, 95% of consumers are still concerned about rising supermarket bills. Almost 1 in 3 female NHS surgeons say they've been sexually assaulted at work in the last 5 years. That's according to a survey by the British Journal of Surgery. 11 instances of rape were reported by those who took part in the study. Meanwhile, 29% of women say they've experienced unwanted physical advances in the workplace. More than 40% received uninvited comments about their body. Wilco has closed 24 of its stores across the UK, with hundreds of workers set for redundancy. The retailer is going into administration, with all 400 of the discount chain's shops set to close by October. Over 12,000 staff are likely to lose their jobs. The company was unable to secure a deal to sell all of its shops, despite talks with HMV to buy 200. More than 50,000 school and council workers are voting on strike action in their ongoing dispute over pay. GMB members are being polled across 3,000 schools and local authorities in England and Wales. Teaching assistants, social workers and refuse collectors are just some of the union members who rejected a pay offer for this year. The ballot will close on the 24th of October, and walkouts are possible as soon as November. Regulators may have breached environmental law by allowing water companies to discharge sewage outside of exceptional circumstances. That's according to the government watchdog. Now, normally it's only allowed following unusually heavy rain to prevent flooding people's homes. However, the Office for Environmental Protection says DEFRA, the Environment Agency and Ofwat may have misinterpreted the law. A DEFRA spokesperson says we do not agree with the OEP's initial interpretations. Meanwhile, the EA and Ofwat are carrying out their own investigations. Stars of sport and reality TV will join a meeting at number 10 to discuss online safety today. It's as the online safety bill returns to the Commons for its final stages. The planned law imposes new legal duties on big tech firms to crack down on online trolls. Michelle Donnellan, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, told us it will make the UK the safest place in the world to be online.
On making sure that illegal content is got rid of as part of our triple shield. The second shield is making sure that platforms actually enforce their terms and conditions, so you know what you're going to get when you sign up to one of these platforms, and they can't treat different groups differently. And thirdly, that we're empowering adults to have more control over the content they see.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Andrew and Bev.
Some more disturbing news this morning was 1 in 3 female surgeons, can you believe that? 1 in 3 in the NHS say they've been sexually assaulted. That's according to a survey published in the British Journal of Surgery.
The report authors warn that a misogynistic culture in hospitals poses a significant risk also to patient safety. Well, Stephen Dorrell, former Health Secretary, joins us this morning. Good morning, Stephen. There has been, for obviously since the beginning of time, sometimes in hospitals, a kind of a power hierarchy. There is this idea that surgeons play God, and maybe this is telling us, these findings, that they've been abusing that power in certain settings.
Well, you say maybe. I think it's demonstrating as a stone cold certainty that they've been abusing that power over their colleagues. And of course, it is partly about the relationship between doctors and colleagues, and it's also about the relationship between doctors and patients families. Can I link this story to the story last week about Martha, the little girl who died sadly at King's College Hospital because the culture in the hospital was demonstrably wrong? Now, if you have bad culture in the operating theatre and bad culture in treating patients who should have been in an intensive care unit, that's a huge issue for the health service to address as a matter of urgency.
I mean, you were a Secretary of State for Health. Did you ever imagine you would have a report on your desk, Stephen, saying that women surgeons in an operating theatre actually sometimes during surgery complain of being sexually assaulted by their male colleagues?
Well, I suppose the truth is, Andrew, that if I'd asked myself that question, and I was at fault probably in not asking it, sadly, I wish I could say it came as a total surprise. Unfortunately, I can't say that because we know repeatedly through the health service that there are too many instances. I quoted Martha from last week. I could quote Mid Staffordshire. I could quote the Bristol baby scandal. There are too many examples within the health service, in the living memory of all three of us, where what was wrong was that the culture created exactly the kind of power dynamic that Bev just described, which is completely inconsistent with good medicine.
But how do we have these trusts and these hospitals who are always very worried about their reputation? We saw this a little bit in the Lucy Letby case even, that when concerns were raised, there was management who didn't want the scandal around the hospital and things were swept under the carpet. And it looks, looking at some of these case studies, that something similar has gone on. So, for instance, there was one trainee surgeon at a female clinician in the operating theatre. The male surgeon was operating and was sweating and leant in and basically wiped his brow on her breasts and did it 2 or 3 times. She was so uncomfortable in the room she couldn't say anything. She handed him a towel and he said, "No, I'll carry on wiping my face on your chest. It's much more fun." Now, in that situation, what do you do if you've got a management who's going to say, "You know what, it's only a bit of fun. He's a very busy and a very clever man and you shouldn't be undermining him like that. Just ignore it." What do we do to make sure that those whistleblowers, I don't call them that, I think they're just victims, can be heard?
Well, the first answer to your question is that management
Stephen. Oh, no. We might get him back. Let's see if we can get Stephen back. We're having a few gremlins this
But
morning.
interesting that Stephen Dorrell was saying he is not totally surprised by this. I was astonished to read it, but of course I've never worked in the health service. But he was the Secretary of State for Health.
Yeah.
He says he wasn't surprised. That is
Am I surprised by it as a woman? I guess as a woman, I don't find it as surprising.
Stephen, sorry, you were answering Bev.
Yeah, sorry, the point I was seeking to make is that across the health service, this is a culture question. Bev asked me the question, should managers be open for this kind of story and should they react to it? To which there is only one answer, and of course the answer is yes. Can I also put the question, you quoted the instance of this woman surgeon who was in effect sexually assaulted during surgery. What was going on round that operating table? It wasn't even the most senior surgeon, according to the press reports, who was doing that. What on earth was going on around in the professional community in that operating theatre, who must have seen what was going on?
Reverence, Stephen, reverence. There is a sense of white coat syndrome. Patients get it, which is when you go into a hospital, you see a white coat and a name badge, and you are instantly intimidated by that person. And it's very difficult to stand up, clearly, even for the junior staff.
I completely understand that, but I also say again, it is totally inconsistent with good medicine or with any professional code of conduct. And so you're right to say there's an issue here for management. Of course there is. I also think there's an issue here for professional regulators, because every person in that operating theatre, from the most senior surgeon to the nurses and the other professional staff who were in that operating theatre, every one of them had an obligation to report that incident to raise concerns in the jargon. Presumably none of them did. That's what was wrong in that operating theatre.
Stephen, thank you. Stephen Dorrell there, former Health Secretary. We're going to go now to an NHS doctor, Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence. Good morning, Frankie. Presumably, hopefully you could hear some of that conversation. What is the culture like, particularly for women in the NHS? Does this report surprise you?
I think the report is incredibly upsetting, but, I agree, it's not totally surprising. There is a real hierarchy in medicine, and there is opportunity for this power to be exploited. I don't work as a surgical trainee, but surgical training does involve learning skills from your senior colleagues. And, particularly in the operating theatre, you really do need to learn from your seniors. And so some seniors do have the opportunity to take advantage of that power. And it's not surprising to me that junior colleagues would be afraid to speak out because of the potential repercussions that would have on their training opportunities. If you're placed in a small district hospital and there's a few consultants, you want to have enough time to get into those surgeries and learn the skills. And there's a lot of shame around, reporting sexual harassment and things like that. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
And Frankie, do some consultants, dare I say, obviously I wouldn't expect you to name anybody, but do they get a reputation for it? Trainees perhaps are warned, be careful of that one?
I feel very lucky, I've read quite a lot of these case reports, that I haven't experienced it myself. Of course, consultants get reputations for their personality, and it's very easy to be like, oh, it's just what they're like. I haven't seen it myself when it comes to sexual harassment or assault, but in general mannerisms that might be unfavourable to work alongside, you definitely do kind of get away with it the more senior you are in a hospital, and it's because of the power you hold.
It's because it's male-dominated too, Frankie.
Yeah, absolutely. Although stats do show that more women are going into medicine. So hopefully we will close down on that power and gender imbalance.
I hope so. There's another story today which I'd love to ask you about, which is the number of NHS trainees or young doctors who want to one day go and live in America, Australia, etc. Are you one of them? But if so, but also, why do people feel that would be more attractive than working in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, the previous story leads quite nicely into this. It just demonstrates that the NHS is not a particularly desirable place to work at the moment. If you think about medical students, these are top students that have worked tirelessly through school to get grades to get into medical school. They're working really hard through med school for 5-6 years, taking on almost £100,000 worth of debt to then work in an environment that is underpaid. We could talk about the strikes. We've seen a massive pay cut over the last 15 years, but also the culture in the workplace isn't great, morale isn't great, and it's hugely understaffed. It becomes a vicious cycle. You hear about all these stories, you're not getting paid very well, you move abroad. That creates further rota gaps, which makes it harder for the people that have stayed. And so unless there is an intervention, this is honestly going to spiral and get worse. But it doesn't surprise me, because these are very skilled and highly educated people, and a medical degree is filled with transferable skills. You would be snapped up if you wanted to transition into another industry. I myself graduated 5 years ago, and quite a number of my colleagues have left the NHS and been snapped up by consulting companies or moved abroad to be paid almost double for a better work-life balance.
OK.
Don't go, Frankie. Don't do it. Stay here. We need you.
Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence.
I haven't got any plans at the moment.
Very good. Very good. Now, we're talking about the China spy saga, which is on a spotlight on Britain's-China's relations and challenged Britain's stance towards the country.
Our political editor, Christopher Hope, joins us from Westminster this morning, Chris. Right, Christopher, I'm a bit sort of cynical about this story. Just tell me why it matters, because all I can see is a 20-odd-year-old advisor, researcher within Parliament who he says he's done nothing wrong. We aren't naming him, and yet one of the newspapers, The Times, is going after him. Is it really something to worry about?
I think it is because, I mean, in that building, you can see a photograph behind me. 19,000 people have access to that building. Ministers, MPs, researchers, they move around away from public gaze. And the concern is if you get people who are aligned to the Chinese state, who is stopping them going to talk to ministers, using letterhead of MPs to go right to ministers? Ministers reply. I mean, I appreciate it's not the kind of deep state, Bev, behind there, but it's access to things which some would say, given China's position as being a challenge economically to this country, it's a worry about. I mean, this guy, this individual we're not naming, he denies completely any involvement with the Chinese state. But there's an alarm. I mean, MI5, I think, warned 18 months ago about infiltration into the House of Commons, and that's the worry. I do know there are no plans to review who are the 19,000 people who have these passes, including me. There's no attempt to look at that. I think they may feel that now they've blown the whistle, or at least they've pointed out there has been an arrest made, that might calm it all down. But I think this idea of spying is never going to go away. It was ever thus, Bev.
Kemi Badenoch, one of the cabinet ministers, the business secretary, when she was challenged about the fact that Britain continues to have links with China, we know the foreign secretary was in China a few weeks ago, she said we can't afford to cut ties with China. But the reason was staggering, because she said it's important that Britain needs China to reach its net zero target. There's no hope in hell of China being persuaded by Britain or any other country to reach its net zero targets, most of people watching this programme and listening to don't agree with anyway.
Well, the irony, of course, is China is doing not much to reach its net zero target, not that it even has one. The UK, of course, is an outlier in G7 countries in cutting emissions and trying to show leadership on this space. A better case that Ms Badenoch may have made would be the fact that China is making the batteries for this new electric Mini. She was unveiling the plans for that on Monday in Cowley near Oxford, Andrew. That might be a better case. Another better case could be about artificial intelligence, because China is forging ahead with AI, not really thinking about how this might affect the rest of the world. And I think the attempt by our PM, Rishi Sunak, to convene a massive summit in November on AI, to which China will probably be invited, is an attempt to bring them back into the fold. What you're seeing now, Andrew and Bev, is a movement of the dial, there's almost a swingometer. But back when David Cameron was the PM, George Osborne, I went on a trip to Shanghai, 747, with bosses trying to win deals for British companies. That went the other way completely under Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, xenophobes, not keen to do any deals with them. And it's come back more into the middle, where we have to talk to China, try and do a deal with them, but also be very wary of what they're up to on the security grounds.
And are we still going to invite China, do you think, to this conference on AI? Because they'll only use it for their own advantages. They're not interested in helping Britain.
I think they will. I think that although there's a very noisy China hawk group in the Tory backbenches led by Ian Duncan Smith, senior players, number 10, think that's a very small group of people. And more broadly, there is a recognition you must talk to China and talk to them. And part of that is bring them to this major AI conference. It's probably in all our interest that China is in that conversation.
All right, thank you, Chris. You know, honestly, it's a day when I wish there was gin in here and not coffee, because I just despair. 2019, we had Chris Skidmore, right, signing this legislation, bragging about the fact that we were going to be the first Western country, the first major economy to pass net zero emissions law. We're so happy. We're the first nation to destroy our country on the route to the religion that is net zero, before any of us had really had a conversation about whether we wanted to go net zero or not.
And the impact it's having on everybody's gas bill, electric bill. You're going to have to get rid of your boilers in your kitchen. You're going to have to...
We ain't seen nothing yet.
There's no infrastructure for electric cars, which cost, what, £30,000?
Honestly?
And part of net zero is the Mayor of London with his wretched, vile expansion of the ultra-low emission zone.
A medieval
And it's
world.
not a London thing. It's coming to towns and cities all over Britain. And now we discover the reason we need to keep talking to China, and I support that we might need to talk to China, is not because we want to get business and jobs out of them, because we want to make them reach their net zero target.
Mind blown.
Well, I hope we don't even reach our own.
When they're building one coal-fired power station a week in China. Anyway, if it makes any sense to you, do let me know. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. We're going to be joined in just a little while by human rights lawyer David Hay to talk about the fact that more and more of you are dissatisfied with how the country is handling immigration. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:27.
11:27.
11:20. I keep getting mixed up.
You just keep adding, you always keep wanting there to be extra time. I think you just enjoy sitting next to me.
No, because we're so looking forward to Mark and Pip afterwards because it's such a great show. It's now 11:27, 26. It's Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pierce and Bev Turner. That's who we are.
Right, around 2/3 of British public are unhappy with the way the government handles immigration, given that it's at its highest level since before the Brexit vote.
We're going to talk to the human rights lawyer, David Hay, who's a great friend of this programme. David, you're probably one of those who is the third who's happy, because while there's hundreds of thousands of people pouring in here, that's very good for your bank balance.
Good morning to both of you. I think you know the survey is probably a good reflection of how the country is thinking. I don't think, you know, if you want to say there's two sides of the story, that, you know, people that welcome asylum seekers and people that don't, or whoever it may be, no one's really happy. The policy of the government, even though Rishi Sunak says it's working in terms of stop the boats, clearly isn't. And at the same time, you know, from a human rights perspective, I'm seeing genuine asylum seekers suffering and being vilified, and so neither side, as it were, if it is a side issue, is winning. So I fully agree with the report. It seems a very sensible one.
How many non-genuine asylum seekers, David, do you see? Tell us honestly.
I mean, you know, there are a considerable number, and, you know, I've mentioned before, back when I was a trainee solicitor, you know, even then there were immigration scams, and you would see them time and time again. So, you know, and that's quite a while ago. So you do see them a lot. There is a considerable commercial benefit for people coming to this country. So people will take that risk. So there are many, and there's a growing nefarious industry around enabling those people to come in illegally. And this is just, you know, the numbers are literally just an example of that, I think. One thing that does concern me, though, is if the Rishi Sunak genuinely believes, as is the comments put out with this information, that he is succeeding in his stop the boats policy, then we need to start looking at his grasp on reality.
How do the genuine asylum seekers that you meet, David, feel about those who are gaming the system to come over here and make money, sometimes through nefarious means?
I think genuine asylum seekers are suffering because, you know, wherever you go up and down the country, because of the non-genuine asylum seekers that aren't coming in here and abusing the system, anyone that is an asylum seeker now is wrongly tagged, you know, that they are ungenuine and that they are the people that, you know, that we can blame various ills in the country on. And they are suffering abuse, as well as changes in the law that will or should do in terms of deter the non-genuine asylum seekers. It's also harming them as well. So they are suffering of the policies as well, greatly. And it's, you know, it's a badge of dishonour now to have the tag asylum seeker, and one that can get you physically harmed. So it's a serious issue.
But do you ever hear those genuine asylum seekers express their anger at those who are gaming the system?
Yes, absolutely, because they are bringing a bad name to the genuine people. So, you know, if you have in your local town up and down the country, you have a hotel or a house that's housing asylum seekers, you don't distinguish between the genuine ones and the non-genuine ones. Everyone is getting tagged with the bad label, and that's harming the genuine people. And so, yes, absolutely, they have, you know, many people have said to me that you know, they are vilified because of the non-genuine asylum seekers.
And what's the percentage, David? You've been very honest here and admit you see a lot of people who aren't genuine. What is the percentage who's genuine in your view and those who are, as Bed would call it, gaming the system?
I mean, of the ones that I've seen, and that's the one that I've seen, so it's not, you know, you can't be, it's not a reflection of the nationality. And the ones that, you know, I only help people that I think are genuine. But the ones that do come through, I would say, and again, in my experience, about 20% genuine.
Only 20%?
Correct.
So 80%?
But that's in my experience.
Well,
so
that's probably typical. So 80% are lying?
Yeah, correct. I would say commercial interests are coming in. They're not trying to come here because they're suffering.
David, that's a shocking figure.
Horror.
That's a shocking
It is.
figure.
I agree. It's an absolute shocking figure.
Were those people, so the 80% who are coming here because they want to improve their quality of life, they're not escaping murderous intent by a particular political regime. Those people who are coming here to make a better life, why aren't they taking any of the legal routes to get here, David? Why aren't they just applying to be, because they just wouldn't qualify on our points-based system, I presume you're going to say?
Absolutely. I mean, in the general, they'll say, for instance, unskilled workers with no real connections here. So there is no genuine kind of legal route that they could come here on. The route that they can come here on is coming across the channel, which would cost them a few £1,000s. So it's of course, it's risk to their life. But if you look at it from their perspective in terms of improving their life, it's a risk that, as we can see, thousands and thousands and thousands are perfectly happy to take. But like I said earlier on, I help genuine people, mostly from the Middle East, that are really suffering in those parts of the world, particularly in the Gulf states, that are genuinely have their lives at risk. And the significant number of people that are coming that are not genuine are harming them.
Oh, David,
Fascinating.
and thank you for being so
As
frank,
always.
David. David Hay, the human rights lawyer down there in Cornwall. Well, that is a staggering figure, but I'm not surprised by it. But I think it's great that he admitted it.
Yeah.
Because if it's 80% for him, it's going to be 80% everywhere.
Likely.
If not higher.
Possibly, probably, who knows?
Because
I would look...
you see the boats coming across the channel. What do you see? 99% young men in their 30s or younger.
You see, I think that's because the journey is dangerous.
Because they're economic migrants.
Yes, but also if you have to cross several countries, you trying to get your kids to walk across the park isn't easy. You can't often get kids,
and then they'll have
women
their families here.
Going across. So that's why it's the men, because they get here and then they want to make money, and then they will bring over their families sometimes. And sometimes they are legally, they have a right to do that. But that figure of 80% of people just gaming the system.
And we are already full up.
Right, still to come, the ongoing row over the American Bully ex-dog. Should the breed be banned following an attack on an 11-year-old girl? We're going to be going through that story and more with our panel. But first, here's the news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thank you both. 33 minutes past 11, our top stories. The Chancellor is defending the British job market despite rising unemployment figures released today. Across the UK, unemployment rose by 0.1%, reaching 4.3% in July, while job vacancies fell to below 1 million. Jeremy Hunt says that remains below many of our international peers. Food inflation has fallen to its lowest level in more than a year, according to the latest figures. Kantar Group says grocery price inflation is down for the 6th month in a row, reaching 12.2%. That's compared to 17.5% back in March. 95% of consumers are still concerned about rising supermarket bills. Labour's deputy leader says pay and housing will be among the top priorities if the party wins the next general election. Angela Rayner set out the party's planned New Deal for workers during the TUC Congress in Liverpool. Ms Rayner told the unions she would not let them down if she becomes Deputy Prime Minister and will make sure that Labour stabilises the economy.
The mask has slipped and the public have seen the truth. Warm words and politically driven handouts won't touch the sides, and empty slogans won't pay decent wages. False promises won't build secure homes, and a soundbite won't empower local people and local communities to take control of their futures.
There's more on all of those stories on our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
A quick finance update. The pound will buy you $1.2472 and €1.1631. Price of gold, £1,539.25 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,534 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
So, still to come, should the American Bully XL dog be banned?
Yes.
I agree. I think they absolutely should.
And the owners are a problem too. Ban them as well.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. For many, there's a bit of a cooler feel around at the moment, with some rain across parts of England in particular, and also the risk of a little thunder later. Taking a look first thing, and yes, a cloudy, wet start across this central slice of England into southwest England as well. Through the morning, some of that rain across parts of Lincolnshire into East Anglia could be quite persistent and heavy at times. Meanwhile, in the far southeast, high humidity could allow for some heavy, perhaps even thundery downpours to develop as we go into the afternoon, whilst across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, a brighter picture, just a scattering of showers, though most places avoiding these. Highs lower than recently, but could get to around 24 or 25 Celsius in the southeast. Through the end of the day, we're going to continue to see a quite cloudy, wet picture across parts of the southeast. That rain will gradually clear away as we go through the night. Otherwise, quite a good deal of clear skies and a slack flow. Under this slack flow, temperatures are going to take a bit of a dip, a real contrast to last week. Some places across parts of Scotland could get close to freezing, perhaps a touch of grass frost, maybe even a localised air frost perhaps. First thing on Wednesday morning then, cloudy to start off in the southeast. Any rain will clear away quite quickly. Otherwise, a lot of dry, bright, sunny weather through a good chunk of the morning. But then things turn wet and windy from the northwest as we go into the afternoon due to a deep area of low pressure that's going to arrive later. Quite a cloudy picture compared to some recent days, and temperatures down a couple of degrees and feeling cooler in the winds.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From Midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. breakfast, whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And it's 11:42. You with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Right, let's see what you've been saying at home this morning. You have been getting in touch with us about the migrants. We were just discussing
That's
this.
before we talked to David Hay.
I know.
80% are liars.
I can't understand why it takes so long to process people who come over here illegally from France. John says if people are in France, they want to claim as asylum, they should do so there. If they don't, then they're not asylum seekers. When they land here from France, they should automatically be banned from claiming asylum based on the fact that they should have done so whilst they were in a safe
country. Yeah.
And Leslie said, instead of giving millions away to other countries, use the money to sort out and strengthen our own border control and systems, and then keep the money. And then
How many times have we heard that?
You know, the
It
sad...
doesn't matter how much money they're pumping, it's useless and incompetent, the Home Office and border system. It's pathetic.
The will isn't there, is it?
No.
And also the failure of Wilco's high street store. We were quite excited a couple of weeks ago. We thought they were going to be rescued. Well, they haven't been. Tony says the failure of Wilco and the general demise of the high street is again the result of the war against the car. Nowhere to park a car is a direct influence on the decision to buy it online. London is different from the rest of the UK, but generally people don't like public transport and they try to avoid it. So true,
Absolutely
Tony.
right.
So true.
But Nigel Nelson supports the extension of the ultra-low emissions zone. That's all right, though. That's all right.
Nigel and Tonya are back with us in the studio. Morning, both.
Somebody has to support it, Nigel. We've got that horrible, rotten, wretched scheme by your mayor, Sadiq Khan.
Oh, which where you live now?
Yeah.
Are you a fan of Sadiq Khan, by the way?
Yeah, I am actually.
Oh,
of course
he is. Of course he is.
I was just about good, I'm glad that's popular.
Nigel, I was just about to say, doesn't Andrew always pick on Nigel? Don't pick on poor Nigel. And you said that, and then go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Support
Sadiq Khan.
I actually do think he's been a good mayor of London. Yeah, I do.
Give me strength, Nigel Nelson. Give me one example of something he's done that you can hang your hat on as a Labour man.
Mostly London works. The area that's gone badly wrong is the tube system, and a lot of
that's quite important.
Yeah, it is important, but a lot of that to do is the fact that the government won't give the money that it needs.
Lawlessness, knife crime, the things that really matter to the British public.
Knife crime was rampant before Sadiq Khan came in.
No, it's much worse.
Litter.
Well, I'm not sure about the litter.
Litter! It's disgusting. The city is just looking worse than it's ever... The bins are never emptied, the pavements are never mowed or looked after. No mow Monday, no mow May.
And there's a great fat black hole in the Transport for London budget, which is why he's imposing this stealth tax on us called the ultra-low emissions.
Well, I mean, the money will be used for London transport, you're absolutely right. And the question then about the black hole you're talking about is whether the government should have actually helped out and stepped in to plug some of that black hole. They lost an awful lot of money during COVID.
Right.
And so they've had difficulties doing that. Sadiq Khan, yes, is running out of money, but that doesn't mean...
How many zebra crossings in pride flags has he painted on the ground across London at 70 grand a time?
No idea,
Too many.
Too flipping many.
How many has he?
I'm amazed. I've never met anyone before that likes Sadiq Khan.
Mrs. Khan.
No, haven't met her.
Apparently.
Wow. Wow. I'm sort of speechless. Right.
Let's talk about bully dogs. They've got to be
from
banned.
one bully in Sadiq Khan to bully dogs, Tonya. You've had an encounter with one.
Isn't it? It's really weird because on Friday morning, Saturday morning actually, I was walking with my husband. Thank God I was with my husband on my high street in Finchley, and we were walking. I have a German Shepherd. He's a big German Shepherd. He's a 2-year-old, but he's a family dog. And as we were walking, this man with this enormous American bully dog, the dog saw my German Shepherd and went for him in a way that was so frightening. Poor Zadigi was just literally cowering, frightened for his life of this dog. And this guy, it took all his strength to stop and hold back his dog from attacking my dog. If the girlfriend had been holding the dog, it would have been game over. I am still frightened from what happened. It petrified me. And I've gone home and said to my children, if you see that dog anywhere, grab Ziggy and come home.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere near him.
And the thing, it's not just... So these dogs have killed 11 people since 2021, 3 children. We've seen the story on the front pages of all the papers today, the little girl who talked about nearly lost her arm. They killed a dog a day.
A day, I know that. That's what's so frightening.
And they should be banned immediately.
You know, and here is where I'm going to cover a different comment. So I have a friend who has one of these dogs. Right. I don't know if it's one of these XL
Why are you a friend with somebody like that?
You know, this dog is actually... He loves it like his baby and looks after it like his baby and has the dog in with his family. And so that's the other side of it.
Do you think it is an XL bully breed, though?
I don't think
something
it's
similar.
XL, it's something similar. My point is, though, I don't think any dogs that have that type of ferocious and that type of jaw lock should be around the public.
I'm agreed.
Do you think we should? Do you think we should literally be knocking on doors now, confiscating these dogs and putting them down, Nigel?
Well, I mean, the first thing you got to do is some decent legislation. The 1991 Dangerous Dogs Act was such a complete and utter failure.
Why? What happened?
Well, I mean, there are a variety of things. One was that they used the legislation to decide which dogs should be put down based on how they looked, not on how their behaviour, not on their heritage, not on their background or anything like that.
There were pit bull terriers with one of them. That was the famous one, wasn't it?
That was one of them. The second thing it did was it demonised certain breeds, so people actually wanted them. The people who wanted to use them illegally wanted them. And the final one is it didn't stop dog attacks, that they've gone up since then 188%. So we still haven't got decent legislation that stops it happening. So I agree with you. I think these dogs should be banned. But just saying, let's ban these dogs, you actually do need to think about how you go about doing it, and you need the right legislation to do it.
Because the owners of them, I met one yesterday, she said, there's no such thing as a bad dog, it's bad owners. And I said, I'm sorry, you're wrong. This is a bad dog.
Yeah, and I think that's...
They're beasts.
But the owners need to be prosecuted. If your dog does harm to someone, that owner needs to be prosecuted. And you know, as far as doing jail time, you know, if some of these maulings that you've seen, people are dying from it.
Life-changing injuries.
Life-changing inures. The owners should go to jail.
Should every dog have a licence, Tonya? Do you think every single dog should have a licence?
Absolutely.
Well, giving licences back would help, because then at least before you actually start owning the dog, you could check what dog you've got to make sure you've got the right one.
One reason they got rid of it at night, I think, correct me, it was something like 40 pence or something. It wasn't even worth the cost of administration.
Yeah, that's right.
Make it a proper charge.
Got rid of it in 1987 because it was no use anymore.
A pensioner or
but at least you'd have some control over the kind of dogs you were getting. The other thing is, if you do have a breed that could be problematic, muzzle them in public.
Yeah, why do we not see more muzzles?
I don't understand.
We used to.
The problem is that and I know I'm making a vast generalisation, but the man that had that dog at the weekend was a classic example of the type of person that has that dog.
You can share that view. What was he like?
Well, he was thuggish-looking guy, you know, just thuggish-looking, trouble-making kind of guy.
Because wouldn't you be a thuggish, louty sort of person to want that sort of
Exactly.
Well, that's the point, but that's why the legislation has to be right, so it doesn't make these dogs more attractive to those kind of people.
I get that. It's problematic, isn't it? But they've got to get on with it, because we're going to have... The next child is going to be a dead child.
Oh, see, this is what breaks my
heart. We saw that footage. You saw that footage in that garage in Birmingham.
That could have been that guy.
That bloke was not fully grown man, knocked down twice by that dog.
And there could have been a death at the end of that.
Could have. And he was attacked by... Somebody took a shovel to the dog, and that didn't deter it.
Yeah, I'm terrified of all dogs. I've said this before, I'm frightened of every single dog, but luckily my children have not inherited that fear. I've tried really hard to make sure that they haven't inherited that fear. But they would be the type of child that would want to go and pat the dog. And how do you get it right? How do you warn them against...
If it looks like that...
Yeah, I like to think they wouldn't.
Exactly.
Right, should we talk about immigration? We were talking just a moment ago to David Hay, very honest. I really like David. He's a regular on the show, immigration lawyer. And he just told us, Nigel, that he thinks, in his opinion, that the immigrants or the refugees that he sees coming to this country, 80% of those who are applying for asylum are fake. That's quite a shocking statistic.
It is. I don't know where he gets his statistics from, but he is in the front line, so fair dues.
Down in the West Country where there's
all I would say is that at the moment, successful asylum applications are running at 77%.
That's because it's easier for the Home Office just
well,
to say yes.
Indeed, it may be that, in fact, that with one of the other problems, obviously, to try and deal with this is you've got to try and clear the backlog.
Yeah.
And if the Home Office are making the interviews easier, quicker, and less thorough, some people come through. I'm not saying there aren't people amongst asylum seekers who are not genuine. I do.
Well, 80% of them are not genuine. Clearly not genuine.
Well,
I mean,
that's a claim, but that's a claim from some. No, that's what I said. I respect the figures he's come up with. I'm just saying that doesn't marry against the national figures.
And he's a liberal lefty like you, Nigel. He is.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear it.
The big point is that they should never arrive on British shores. If you arrive on British shores, then you're never going to make it to become a British citizen. That's what's going to happen. You're in a safe country in France.
Yeah.
You need to put your application in then. Once you get your application, come then. If you're coming over illegally, and they should be shipped.
But that used to be the rule before we had Brexit.
No, it never applied. It never, because they were doing it when they were getting on lorries and all that sort of, Nigel. It's a misnomer. This is not right what you're saying.
No, but if you go back to 2019, when there were far fewer crossings, they're in a few hundred. 1 in 3 were sent back to European countries.
That's because we have thousands now.
I know we've got thousands now. What I'm saying is that when it was smaller, the actual statistic was 1 in 3. So that means that the returns agreement with European countries was working. We lost those returns agreements after Brexit. You can't send these people just back to France.
Why not?
Why not?
That's where they came from.
Well, no, they didn't come from there. They quite clearly didn't come from there.
They crossed the Channel from France, a safe country.
They passed through France to get to Calais. Why do they get to Calais? To come to Britain. The French would turn around and say, well, hang on a sec, they're not our problem. In the same way that people trying to get back to France from Morocco and Tunisia and places like that come through Britain now. Would you suggest the French send them back here because they've landed in our country to get to France?
If they come to France, I'd send them back.
OK, but would you send them...
No, I'm not interested in France. I'm running Britain.
OK.
I'm running our immigration service.
So you'd be perfectly happy for those Moroccans or whichever from French-speaking previous colonies who can't get into France at the moment, get a visa to come to Britain, a holiday visa or whatever, then they cross the Channel in the opposite direction and end up in France.
That's not happening very often, though, is it,
Nigel? The numbers
no, but it's
very
happening.
Small
it's happening, and the principle is the same.
Extreme example.
So the question then is, would you favour the French sending those people back here?
No.
But why then? What's the logic of them sending...
Because it's not happening.
Well, it is happening.
It isn't. It's a minority. We've run out of time, apparently. Time to continue this conversation.
Oh, we didn't even get on to Novak Djokovic winning the US Open, sponsored by Pfizer. I like that. That's quite satisfying. And Moderna, actually, wasn't it?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Good morning. For many, there's a bit of a cooler feel around at the moment, with some rain across parts of England in particular, and also the risk of a little thunder later. Taking a look first thing, and yes, a cloudy, wet start across this central slice of England into southwest England as well. Through the morning, some of that rain across parts of Lincolnshire into East Anglia could be quite persistent and heavy at times. Meanwhile, in the far southeast, high humidity could allow for some heavy, perhaps even thundery downpours to develop as we go into the afternoon, whilst across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, a brighter picture, just a scattering of showers, though most places avoiding these. Highs lower than recently, but could get to around 24 or 25 Celsius in the southeast. Through the end of the day, we're going to continue to see a quite cloudy, wet picture across parts of the southeast. That rain will gradually clear away as we go through the night. Otherwise, quite a good deal of clear skies and a slack flow. Under this slack flow, temperatures are going to take a bit of a dip, a real contrast to last week. Some places across parts of Scotland could get close to freezing, perhaps a touch of grass frost, maybe even a localised air frost, perhaps. First thing on Wednesday morning then, cloudy to start off in the southeast. Any rain will clear away quite quickly. Otherwise, a lot of dry, bright, sunny weather through a good chunk of the morning. But then things turn wet and windy from the northwest as we go into the afternoon due to a deep area of low pressure that's going to arrive later. Quite a cloudy picture compared to some recent days, and temperatures down a couple of degrees and feeling cooler in the winds.